Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers. This is the brand new Hoka Cielo X1 2.0, Hoka's latest super shoe racer. Now myself, Nick and Gill have all been putting the testing time in with the new Cielo. And before we get into some running thoughts, we'll let you know what's new from the Cielo X1, get into our experiences, and then let you know whether the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 is one of the best super shoe racers to buy this year. So here's the key details you need to know about the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0. The price remains the same as the Cielo X1, so that's £250 in the UK and $275 in the US, putting it just below shoes like the Alphafly 3 and Saucony Endorphin Elite 2. The drop is a 7mm one, where stack heights, when scaled down to a UK size 8, make it a legal racer and approved for competition. The weight of the shoe has dropped quite significantly, with our men's UK 8 weighing in at 196 grams compared to 242 grams in the same size Cielo X1. The upper is now made from an engineered jacquard mesh, with Hoka adding new laces, tongue, and redesigned the heel collar and leveler padding you'll find at the back of the shoe. There's a new sock liner to add bounce to the ride, and once again uses a dual density PEBA midsole, with cutouts now more at the medial area of the shoe. The wing carbon plate in between that PEBA has been updated, that along with Hoka's aggressive meta rocker aims to deliver a more propulsive ride. To keep things controlled, Hoka uses a 4-foot focus active foot frame to better secure and stabilise your feet at the front of the shoe. Down below is a sticky rubber outsole to provide your grip with a little more exposed foam compared to the Cielo X1.
When it comes to the fit of Cielo X1 2.0, it's been fine for me in my normal running shoe size, the same size I had with the Cielo X1 and Hoka's other shoes. General Hoka can be a bit more narrow than other brands, but as someone with a narrow fit, I tend to appreciate that, and I've had a really secure lockdown fit with the Cielo X1 2.0. Little changes to the first shoe, a little bit more padding around the back there and a little bit more structure there, which has been fine for me. I didn't really have a problem with that on the first shoe, but I think it is a slightly better heel design on the new one. Laces have definitely been improved. I think Hoka actually improved the laces on later models of the Cielo X1, and now the Cielo X1 2.0, you're not going to have that problem where those kind of ribbon style laces would sometimes come undone. Laces are a bit long, but other than that I have no real concerns about them. So all round, happy with the fit of the Cielo X1 2.0 in my normal running shoe size.
First thing to note is that I got sent actually a size, half a size too small when I was sent the shoe, so it should be a 7 and I got sent a 6.5. So I've kept all my testing to under 10 miles just because I didn't want to be stupid. I'm in the middle of marathon training. I didn't want to get any kind of toe issues or anything like that. That said, actually, over that kind of distance, I've not had any issues at all. And I know that some people quite like a tighter fit on a race shoe, or certainly slightly more snug. So I think probably actually you've got about half a size to play with. If I was going for a full marathon, I think I'd want to go back up to the size 7s because of kind of foot expansion over the distance when you kind of get a bit of swelling or it's a bit hot. But actually I think the 6.5 would be fine for a shorter distance, and I might be tempted to go with that just because they're a really nice, comfortable, snug fit at 6.5. So yeah, I think you've got a bit of room to play with there. They're probably true to size, but you wouldn't have a problem if you needed to drop down half a size for a snugger fit, if that's kind of what you like.
So in terms of fit, it's been all good for me in the Cielo X1 2.0. I've got mine in a UK size 8. That's the same size I had the Cielo X1, and that's my usual running shoe size. Now this is a bit more typically Hoka in terms of fit compared to the X1. As you can see, it's definitely more narrow here. You can see from the back of the shoe all the way to the midfoot. It does open up in the toe and the toe box, which does make it still very well suited for longer distances. But my skinny feet, absolutely fine. But I think compared to the Cielo X1, which is definitely a more accommodating shoe, that is something to be mindful of in the X1 2.0. I think some other things to mention here, the laces are much better than the Cielo X1. I definitely had problems. I wasn't the only one. So these are more traditional laces, just work a lot better and kind of, you know, offer a better kind of lockdown kind of fit over this tongue. I think other thing as well here, if you didn't like the kind of lack of kind of padding, more traditional padding in the heel kind of area and heel collar, then you're getting more here on the Cielo X1 2.0. And again, you know, it quite narrows there a little bit, but it's been fine for me, no irritation whatsoever, and kind of locks things in very nicely in place. So yeah, the main thing for me would be that it has fit true to size for me on my skinny feet. It has narrowed compared to the Cielo X1, and that's something to be mindful of. But I think going true to size for me has worked and should work for most people, I think.
I was a really big fan of the Hoka Cielo X1. I've used it for over 350k of running, more than I've run in any other shoe since it was released, but it's fair to say I wasn't really using it for its intended purpose. I didn't view it as one of the best racing shoes because it was just a bit too heavy, I think, for a racing shoe, although I did race in it a couple of times. I've mostly used it as a fast training shoe, especially during marathon training. It's just the perfect long run, fast long run, long session shoe because it is comfortable, fun, bouncy, really fun shoe to run in, fairly stable for a carbon shoe and just works really well for that purpose. But I did want to see some changes to the second version of the shoe that made it more of a racing shoe, starting with that weight. And Hoka, I think, has made some really good changes to make this one of the best racing shoes on the market now. A couple of the smaller changes that I think are good. One is the laces I talked about in the fit section, not being ones that come undone. And the outsole, I think, has been improved. I think you've got better grip with the new shoe. But really the big change is the drop in weight. It's a huge drop in weight. The X1 2.0 weighs 214 grams or 7.5 ounces in my UK size 9, which is down from 253 grams or 8.9 ounces for the original shoe. And that's a lot of weight to shed. So basically the question was, what has Hoka taken away from the shoe to make it that much lighter? I was worried that with a much lighter shoe you might lose some of that really big springy fun ride that you get with the Cielo X1, but that's not the case. You still retain that with the 2.0. It's a really fun bouncy shoe, really propulsive, one of the really big bouncy carbon shoes on the market. I think it compares to stuff maybe like the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro line, things like that, but in a slightly tamer, more normal design than the Mizuno. Really fun ride. I even did a short run wearing both shoes at the same time, the X1 and the 2.0, to see if it still had that level of bounce, and it certainly does. And it's now just faster and more aggressive. So the change in weight helps with that, but the way the midsole cutouts are set up as well, I think also makes the rocker a bit more aggressive. You really get pushed onto your toes and you get a really direct, fast ride from this shoe now. So I've done several hard runs in it in the last couple of weeks of my marathon training for Seville, including a long progression run I did on the track. I've done an alternating 16k on the road as well, and then I've done a steady 10 miler in the shoe, and it's just really impressed me every time. It's just a really fun shoe to run in still, like the original, but now a faster shoe, and one that you really feel you can push to those fast paces without worrying that you'll win a slightly big or bulky shoe or anything like that. So the cost of reducing the weight compared to the Cielo X1 is not the fact that this is now a less fun shoe to run in, but instead that it's much less stable one. Like the Cielo X1 was pretty stable for such a high stack shoe, such a bouncy shoe. The Cielo X1 2.0 is not a stable shoe. I think it's really flipped to the other end of the spectrum here now. It feels quite natural to walk around in. It's not a shoe that feels great at slower paces, whereas the Cielo X1, like I said, I was using it as a fast trainer, basically doing lots of varied runs in it, and it was always really good to run in. This now feels much more in line with other top carbon shoes as a shoe that you reserve for your fastest sessions and race day itself, because that's when it really shines. And if you're running it at your easy paces or just trying to walk around in it even, it feels a bit unnatural. Part of that is the way the cutouts have changed. That big medial side cutout now is noticeable on the run. It's also just a narrower shoe in general compared to the Cielo X1. So you have lost out on a bit of stability here, but that's not a big cost to me. That's what I am prepared to lose in a racing shoe. I just want a shoe that's going to be really fast and deliver on race day and in really fast sessions. I don't necessarily want a shoe that's going to deliver like the Cielo X1 did. That was an amazing shoe to run in lots. I obviously have run in it a lot, but you can get that kind of feeling from much cheaper super trainers. That's probably what you'd use for those kind of runs more than a £250 shoe. That's a shoe that you really want to excel on race day. If you are someone who loved the Cielo X1, it might be worth looking for some deals on that shoe because you're not getting quite the same feeling from the Cielo X1 2.0, but I do think you are getting a more effective racing shoe. Now, the only cost I can foresee potentially with this change in design, the less stable design, is towards the end of races. I do think, as I said earlier, it's a bit like the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro line, which are outlandish shoes. They're more outlandish than the Hoka, they're a bit more exaggerated, but you have got a slightly similar feeling here with that really aggressive rocker, that big, propulsive, bouncy mid-foot point on the shoe that then rolls into a rocker, and start to worry as your form breaks down a little bit in maybe a race like the marathon, how the shoe will respond to that. Now, it's not as much of a worry for me as with the Mizuno. I wouldn't really look at the Mizuno as a marathon racer for myself because I'm not sure how I'd feel about it later in those long races. Cielo X1 2.0, I really do want to go and race a marathon and look forward to trying to do that at some point. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how it feels towards the end of that compared to some shoes that have maybe a bit more of a natural feeling, like the Brooks Hyperion Elite PB, even something like the Puma DV8 Nitro Elite 3. Not so worried about your form breaking down in those. Even the Asics Meta Speed Sky Paris with the Cielo X1 2.0, yeah, you might have a bit more fear about how you respond in the final few Ks when you're starting to fall apart, because it is such an aggressive design now with that midfoot rocker.
On the run test then, my first impression when stepping into the shoe was that I was a little bit worried that it was going to break me, but also very, very excited. It feels incredibly unstable when you put it on. As mentioned before, I've not tried the previous version, but they've moved the really aggressive cutout, which again, so the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro is the one that comes closest to it for the kind of level of cutout. They've moved it to the medial side of the shoe, same as the Rebellion Pro, which is the inner side. So if you pronate naturally or have weak ankles, then it really feels like you're falling inwards a lot when you put them on, when you're stood still or when you're going slower. Looking at some pictures of the updates that they've done to the winged plate since the version 1.0 of the X1, I'd say they seem to have got rid of some of the width off the side of that plate, and so therefore some stability will have been lost by reducing that as well, although obviously you'll reduce a little bit of weight too. So it does feel very unstable when you first put it on. On the positive side, it's a while since I put on a race shoe and it's really had that fairy dust feel to it. These, you put them on and you're like, heck, there's something mad but exciting about these shoes. So with so many carbon plate shoes around at the moment, there are many that just feel like they just feel really comfortable, which is great, but you don't put them on and go, I've got to race right now. This shoe, I put them on and I thought, when's my next race? The dual density Puma midsole combined with that plate makes them feel so bouncy and like it just feels like you've got springs on your feet. And add to that this really aggressive meta rocker. I mean, if you kind of ping them on the floor, you can see them rock backwards and forwards. It makes you want to get up on your toes and really roll into some fast running straight away. So my first run, I'd had a really stodgy patch. I'd not had any great runs in a long time, been ill, various stuff, just felt really stodgy. And my first one, I got them and it was just a progression run, so I shouldn't have really been wearing them, but it was exactly the right run to try them out on, because it turns out the faster you run in them, the more fun they are. They really come into their own as you really start rolling through and switching up through the gears. As I said, because of the size of shoe, I've not gone super long in these, but over the training that I've done in them, some intervals, some progression runs and some easy running, which is not what they're designed for at all, I've not noticed any kind of extra weird muscle strains or muscle fatigue coming from running in them, which I was a bit concerned about because of that kind of tipping in. I felt like I was going to have to control that. But actually, I think as soon as you start moving faster, that becomes less of an issue. And to be honest, I'd be interested to try it over the longer distance. I think I'd still be a bit nervous, but I think they're fun enough that I really want to, because I think they'll make me really fast. I wonder if the larger size might make a slight difference to how aggressive the rocker feels, because obviously where your foot is in the shoe really affects the placement of that rocker. So maybe it would be slightly less aggressive in the right size, if you see what I mean. But it'd be interesting to try it if I manage to get hold of a larger size. I've not had any issues with the high up at the back at the heel. I did feel like the sides of the ankles might come up a bit under my ankle bone initially, but that's come to nothing. So I think that just must have been an oddity on the first day, but I'll let you know if that reappears. And then, of course, there's a nice sticky rubber outsole, which does actually work really well. And actually, ironically, comes further back on the heel than a lot of other shoes, which are designed more for heel strikers than this. This is not a heel striker shoe, but that does actually come, give pretty good coverage. And I've not had much wear there at all. I would just say I've not tried a track session in these. I am not brave enough to try cornering at high speed in them, or high speed for me. I will leave that to braver run testers than me for right now. But I guess it would be a lot of fun, right? So yeah, these have really shone in the testing over the longer distances. I think when you're doing intervals, you feel great as soon as you accelerate. It feels a bit odd when you're doing your easy recoveries, but these really come into their own when you're rolling forward, and they make you want to have a good day. I really enjoyed running with them.
Okay, into that run test, and I've done well over 50k in this shoe. I have raced in the shoe, 10k distance, and you'll probably see in the channel already. I have kind of done track sessions with this. I've done intervals. I've done kind of rep sessions. I've done longer runs in this. And what I would say overall is I've had a good time running in the Cielo X1 2.0. I really liked the X1. I really liked it particularly for longer distances, maintaining my kind of half marathon pace at those longer distances. It felt really, really at home there. I raced shorter distances with that shoe as well. I think it probably lacked a little bit, probably was a little bit too heavy and, not as aggressive as some other carbon racing shoes, which I think have that versatility at shorter distances. I think that has changed with the Cielo X1 2.0. Mainly because it's got lighter, mainly because the way the design has changed and the cutouts just make it a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more rockered. I think even just walking around it, you can just see that it just kind of tips you a little bit more on your toes. And when you're ready to run hard in this shoe, it really does reward you with a nice feeling. You get all those qualities of that dual density PIBA that we got on the Cielo X1. Now it's just kind of been tuned in a lighter shoe to just feel more lively and, you know, still give that bouncy feel, but still give you just a touch more aggression, I think. And, you know, that Meta Rocker works really well like it does on the Cielo X1, but it just feels like it's been more emphasized in this design of this version of the shoe. I think it is less stable, and that was a big concern for me for longer runs, because I think that was the real kind of enjoyment I got from the Cielo X1. You know, it was very stable, controlled, bouncy, lively, but I did feel like, you know, when my legs started to tire, I didn't feel like it was a shoe working against me or it was an awkward shoe to run in. Now, I feel like that's been introduced slightly, that kind of, you know, feeling, but I don't think it's been too bad for me. I do feel like I've been able to still cruise in this shoe at half marathon paces. And, you know, those longer runs, I haven't felt like it's been an awkward shoe to run in. I think from a durability point of view, the outsole, I think, you know, it isn't the best outsole you're going to get on a racing shoe. There's not a huge amount of rubber. It's just really focusing or giving you enough in those key areas to try and keep the weight down, but give you enough grip. You know, I think I'm not seeing any terrible signs of wear yet. I would expect to see it around here, around the heels. You know, I'm a heel striker, so that's kind of where I expect to see it, those kind of exposed areas. I'm not seeing too much of it. I mean, it's quite muddy, my shoe, so it's quite hard to see, but I can see quite clearly there isn't any signs of wear. I still would be using it just for my racing, maybe for my training kind of runs at race pace, but I don't think it's going to give you best outsole durability or durability in general of all the carbon kind of racing shoes. I think it's going to be thereabouts with most of the other shoes. Overall, like the Cielo X1 2.0, I do think it is a livelier shoe than the Cielo X1. I think it keeps the good qualities of the Cielo X1 and really just kind of accentuates those qualities by the change in the design and the change in the weight. And I think makes it a better racer for me over shorter distances, but still maintains that good feeling over longer runs as well.
My verdict on the Cielo X1 2.0, it's a big update and it's a great update. It's the update I wanted to see from the shoe line. As a big fan of the first shoe, I wanted to see a racier version of it, and that's what you've got here with the Cielo X1 2.0. I think it's Hoka's best racing shoe. It's actually lighter than the Rocket X2, whilst having a more aggressive rocker and feeling underfoot than the Rocket X2 for me. And like I say, it's a very different shoe to the Cielo X1. Almost to the point where you could have both of them in an incredibly expensive rotation, where the Cielo X1 picks up your fast training and then the Cielo X1 2.0 is your racing shoe. I wouldn't recommend that. I'd get something like, you know, the Mac X2 if you're looking at Hoka shoes for your super trainer, and this is now a bona fide race day thoroughbred. So I do have it right up there with my favourite racing shoes on the market, and it's certainly one that I want to give a go in a flat out marathon at some point if I can. But my next marathon I'm going to be racing in my favourite racing shoe at the moment, which is the Asics Meta Speed Sky Paris, which I still would advise picking up ahead of the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 if you have no real idea what you're looking for in a racing shoe. The Meta Speed Sky Paris is my favourite racing shoe. It's a bit cheaper than this shoe, it's still a bit lighter, it's got a really fast dynamic turnover, it's not as bouncy and rockered as the Hoka, but you really do get a really responsive ride off that forefoot, and I do think it's still the standout shoe on the market for me. But a lot of what we're getting to now with carbon shoes at the sharp end of things is personal taste, and you might prefer this more rockered, bouncy, propulsive design that you get with the Hoka, and are happy to pay a bit more for it. I think in terms of performance, it's going to be very similar. Other really good shoes you can look at is the Nike Alphafly 3, which is almost in between, I think, the Asics and the Hoka. It's got a bouncier ride than the Asics, but it's still got more of a natural transition onto the forefoot. It's not quite as sharply rockered as the Hoka and as springy around the midfoot. It's even more expensive than the Hoka, actually, but that's another, you know, top-tier racing shoe, obviously, that you could look at as another option. And that actually, maybe, I think the Cielo X1 2.0 feels a bit more in line with something like the Alphafly 1. It's a bit more rockered, I think, than that shoe, but if you're still chasing the feeling of that shoe and haven't found that modern racers have lived up to it for you in your mind, then the 2.0 could be one to check out. Another really good option that comes in a fair bit cheaper is the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. That's just a really fantastic shoe. Very high level of performance, outstanding grip, quite a natural ride, but certainly a very fast and responsive one. It's a bit more like the Asics than the Hoka. It's not as bouncy and rockered and propulsive as this shoe, but it's lighter, it's a lot cheaper, and that could be another really fantastic race day option to look at. So there are loads of great carbon shoes to pick from right now. Personally, I have the Hoka as probably my favourite really bouncy style of shoe. So the Meta Speed Sky Paris is probably the one I'd look for as a racer. overall, partly because of my running style. I have a high turnover, high cadence, and I find that those lightweight shoes with a snappy transition just work really well for me, whereas sometimes the big bouncy ones might not work as well because I'm not such a loping runner. But I want to put that to the test with the Cielo X1 2.0 in a race. I have enjoyed and done well in marathons in the past with those bouncier style of shoes. So yeah, right up there, really good update, really good shoe. You will lose out a little bit of stability of the Cielo X1. If you love that shoe, try and find it in a sale maybe, because I think the new version is a fair bit different. But for me, the changes for the better in terms of making it a more effective racing shoe.
Overall then, I think when you look at these and the insane cutout section next to the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro and the Crazy Rocker, they'd seem like quite a similar offering. That's kind of the closest thing, or maybe possibly the Saucony Endorphin Elite, just because they're kind of aggressive. Equally, this shoe makes a Vaporfly or an Endorphin Pro or the Metaspeed Sky Paris seem kind of pedestrian when you put them on. Not that they are when you get running with them. They're great shoes, particularly obviously Metaspeed Sky Paris, huge, like so light and very fast. But this just has that kind of like little sort of, well, it's literally got a sparkle to it. There is a sparkle on the shoes, but it's got something interesting to it. 250 quid, it's a lot of money. I mean, you can get a Vaporfly for under 200 now. You can get the Deviate Nitro Elites for under 200. 250 quid is very expensive, and I think if I just put them on in a shop, I would be too nervous about how odd they feel and whether they were gonna injure me, maybe, just with the roll-in feel. I think I might be too scared to shell out that kind of cash. But if I'd had a run in them, like now that I know what they're like, I think I'd be very tempted. In fact, if I don't get the right size, I think I might be saving up to go and get the right size, because they make me want to race fast and they can clearly perform. And I'm really interested to see what they'll be like on the long run. So yeah, I think they're a very strong contender, but they're also very expensive.
So my take on the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0 is that this is a fine, punchy racer of a shoe. And if you're looking for something that is lively, bouncy and aggressive, absolutely that's what this shoe is going to give you. And I think crucially, now that it's lighter and still retains all of those good qualities from the Cielo X1, it now feels better suited to racing at shorter distances as well. Now, as a upgrade to the Cielo X1, I think it is in a few ways. That drop in weight, I think, definitely kind of emphasizes that more aggressive feel from a similar kind of midsole makeup. The design, however, does make it less stable than the Cielo X1. I think the Cielo X1, you know, you're getting a, as I said, more stable shoe. I think you're getting a more accommodating shoe for more runners. And I think particularly over longer distances, I think a lot more people are going to find it more comfortable to get that still bouncy, lively feel, but just in a more controlled feeling shoe. And I think that's something to keep in mind here. I think compared to something on the Rocket X2, that's still a fantastic shoe. I think particularly shorts up to kind of half marathon distance, I would probably pick this over that shoe now, just because I think the qualities of it as a racer shoe just, you know, can work at the same distances as a Rocket X2, and that's a shoe I'd probably pick now in kind of Hoka's range. If you look outside of its range, you've got, you know, obviously it's pretty expensive. It's not quite Alphafly 3 Endorphin Elite 2 price, but it's not far off. You've got things below it like the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, which is lighter. It has all similar qualities and is, you know, probably arguably the best racing shoe you can get. You've got things like the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3, again, much cheaper. Again, think it gives you that kind of very good aggressive ride in it. Maybe not super aggressive or as unstable as the Cielo X1 2.0, but definitely gives you a good experience for less money. So there's definitely cheaper options, I think, in the mold of the Cielo X1 2.0 and the type of racer it is. But if you like the Cielo X1, like the idea of that shoe being a more aggressive, you know, a kind of bouncy, lively shoe and lighter shoe, then I think you're going to like the Cielo X1 2.0. If you're looking for the best value option, this is probably not necessarily it. But in terms of being a pure racing shoe across distances, Cielo X1 2.0 is absolutely worth looking at. Okay, so there you have it. That is our multi-tester take on the Hoka Cielo X1 2.0. And don't you worry, we have got comparison videos on the way with shoes that have launched this year and last year as well. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, do let us know. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.